Hello and welcome to Naked Snake Press in collaboration with Horror Girls Nightmare Emporium. Today, let's take a look at Unsolved Mysteries, Reddit style. Jardine family murders. Husband, pregnant wife, and young son. Wife and son bludgeoned in their bed. The mother gave birth. The perpetrators then bludgeoned the newborn. They found the husband shot execution style outside. No fingerprints or DNA were found at the scene. It was completely clean. Mary Shotwell Little has always kept me up at night. Went missing after shopping at Lenox Mall in Atlanta in 1965. She was a newlywed, so she was called the missing bride. She was reported missing by co-workers the next morning, but her car was no longer in the Lenox parking lot. Her husband was out of town, and when he returned and went to Lenox to look for her, her car was now there. The car had her groceries, blood spots, and a folded pair of women's underwear on the console. Lots of weird details in this case, like the car being returned in daylight, her credit card being used, and her being spotted in NC under duress and with two men. Her body has never been found and the case is still unsolved. Last year I worked for DEMA, Danish Emergency Management Agency. We were called out to a case of a man losing contact with his partner who was inside a chimney at a Danish art project. He was supposed to uninstall some lights, but when his partner radioed him, there was radio silence. His partner was controlling the mobile crane used to lower him inside, which was the only way up there. When we arrived, the man had been inside the chimney/cylinder for about 2 to 3 hours. There were drones installed with heat-reading cameras in the air trying to see if he was alive, and when we got the picture, his body was still warm. Since we had no way of getting up there, we had called for another mobile crane with which we could get to the top. My partner and our sergeant went up, and when they pulled out the man, he was already dead. We couldn't figure out how it happened, but when we got the report back, it said he died from his injuries. But there was no major bruising on his body. I still don't know how he died to this day. Back in the 1930s, there was a serial killer called the Cleveland Torso Murderer who would cut off people's limbs, heads, and genitals, then leave the torsos behind for the police to find them. Not only did they never figure out who the killer was, but they also never figured out who most of the victims were. A story my father told me about his childhood friend. He took his wife and daughter, 5 at that time, to Thailand for holidays. They traveled in a group of like 10. One day they were at a local market, shopping for spices, etc. His daughter was with the mother, but other adults from the group were also nearby. She checked some goods on a stand, and when she turned back, the girl was nowhere to be seen. They immediately called the police, but after 2 days of search, they were told that after such a long time the chance they find her is really low, and that they should prepare for the worst. The wife has returned home and lost her senses out of grief, was placed in a mental hospital. The father stayed behind and searched for a couple more months until he gave up. I don't know how they are doing at the moment, as my father has lost contact with the guy. This happened like 8 years ago and she was never found. I am now 26 and my stomach still feels heavy when I think about what might have happened to her. In the area I grew up, there was someone killing prostitutes and burying them in the sand dunes by the beach. They would sporadically show up. To my knowledge, the person was never found. One time when I was about 18, I and one of my friends pulled off the Ocean Parkway at around 2 a.m. and were walking around the dunes when like 3 cop cars rolled up, flashing lights and yelling at us to come over. They ended up holding us for like an hour and searched our whole car. Took me a few years to realize that we were wandering around the dunes right at Gilgo, and they might have thought we were the serial killer. Gilgo. The police have long suspected a guy named John Bittrolf, who was already in jail for 2 consecutive life sentences for 2 other murders. His brother submitted DNA after he violated an order of protection unrelated to the murders, and they found a partial match of the brother's DNA to DNA found on one of the bodies. So basically, while a string of those murders may never be truly solved, the police basically got their guy. About 1.5 years ago I was broken into. They stole essentially all my life savings, which were in precious metals, along with a bunch of other miscellaneous personal belongings. The police never found them. 3 days later, I see my door is broken in again and thieves came back and put a couple of things back, including a gold ounce coin with a note attached that my dad had written to me when I was an infant, telling me he loved me. Less creepy, just strange, criminals with a conscience. I forgot the names, but a family was going on a vacation to a sports game, but the dad stayed home because he wanted to record it, and his TV didn't have an auto record function, meaning he had to be there to hit the record. The family gets home and the dad is missing. The game is recorded on TV, meaning he had to have been there when it aired. The fridge had 2 turkey sandwiches freshly made. Someone driving down the highway near their house spotted a body on the side of the road. They turned around to find it, but it was gone. Probably that one kid that went out and disappeared but was found mangled up in a chimney a decade later by his parents. In my city, some companies moved a huge refrigerator at their work site and found the body of a kid that worked there. He had gone missing a decade before that. Local bar, missing man from a few years ago. Nowhere to be found. He was drunk and had gotten into an argument at the bar. Walked to an Arby's at some point. His glasses were found on the ground, but no trace of him otherwise. This one isn't well known, but I found it last night while killing time, no pun intended. On March 28, 1979, hikers discovered a decomposed body in rugged, mountainous areas. The remains were determined to belong to a young white man between the ages of 16 to 22. He had been decapitated. While searching for his head, police found another decapitated body and a severed head that did not belong to either of the victims. So, 2 headless bodies and a severed head were found. None of the 3 victims were ever identified, and they remain John Doe to this day. There's something really creepy about finding the decapitated remains of 3 young men and, not only never identifying the killer, but never identifying the victims themselves. You'd think, out of the 3 victims, at least one person who knows any of them would come forward, or report them missing. 2 young girls who disappeared from the Oklahoma State Fair in 1981, I don't know why, but this case has always bothered me. The Oklahoma Girl Scout murders from the late 1970s. If you let yourself fall into the rabbit hole, it's a good real-life horror movie with the following elements. 3 girls below the age of 10 were raped and murdered in their tent on the first night of Girl Scout camp, which shuts down for good the very next day. A mysterious note forewarning of a triple murder found during prep for the camp, reports of strange occurrences in the woods the night of the murders, allegations that the killer knew ancient Cherokee shape-changing techniques that helped them evade capture, and the deaths of 2 of the 3 dogs brought in to assist with the search, one of whom inexplicably just walked into heavy traffic. There were rumors that some Cherokee medicine man put a curse on them. A prosecution where the only person ever charged was acquitted because the defendant violated the judge's instruction not to let the jury know that he would be returned to prison to finish out an earlier sentence he'd escaped from regardless of the verdict, and then that defendant goes back to prison and dies of a heart attack while lifting weights. At the age of 33, evidence that there were multiple perpetrators and that the evidence points to someone other than the one guy who tried, whom the police framed because he was Cherokee. And speaking of the police, they went inexplicably from saying that they had tons of evidence and would soon be making an arrest to having just one fingerprint and blaming their failure on the media. And the perpetrators remained around the area, leaving evidence from the crime behind to rattle the staff who remained after the camp closed. Also, the Regional Girl Scout Council, when it bussed all the campers back to Tulsa the day after the murders, told parents that 3 girls had been murdered but didn't tell them which ones. A real mindfuck when the buses returned that got them sued, unsuccessfully. The Ketty murders. A quadruple homicide in 1981 in the Sierra Nevada. Cabin 28. Unsolved to this day. I think there are some suspects, but most of them are dead. The sketches of the suspects have always creeped me out. If you want a similar, even creepier case, look up the Dardeen family murders in southern Illinois. Family horribly tortured before being killed, the mother so badly that she went into labor, after which the killers promptly did the same to the newborn, but then they went to the point of cleaning up the house and tucking the mother and her children into bed. There was money and marijuana in plain sight that wasn't taken, so they don't think the motive was a robbery. Especially when the killers also took the trouble to dump the father's body in a nearby field, after they had cut off his penis and tossed it to the side. I recently read about one that happened in Winnipeg. This DJ went missing in the early 2000s. The bar he was last seen in and the building next door smelled of sewage in the morning. After smoking was banned inside, it got worse. They investigated and found the DJ body in the wall. There was a spot they thought he climbed in, but they don't know why. The Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders in 1972-73. I grew up in the area but didn't hear anything about it until a couple of years ago. 7 girls and women were murdered and dumped along rural roads in Sonoma County. The case is often overshadowed by the Golden State Killer and Zodiac Killer. Who murdered these girls in sleepy Sonoma County remains a mystery to this day. Two young teens recorded their suspected murderer on Snapchat hours before they were reported missing. This case is still ongoing as far as I'm aware, and sounds like the police are actually making good progress towards getting the man that matches their photo fit. The Delphi murders. Scary stuff. I'm not much older than they were, crazy to think that it would be that easy to kill me. The Texas killing fields. Simply because I grew up hearing about most of these murders on the local news in Houston. While it isn't a single unsolved mystery, femicides in Ciudad Juarez. Terrible, 1,993 present. There have been mass killings of women in Juarez, Mexico. I'm from El Paso, so this is pretty common knowledge. To date, more than 375 women have been murdered. Multiple mass graves have been found. The government won't investigate, and when they do, it's half-assed. Multiple killers have been tried, and most of them walk. Around 1999, a man in South America claimed to have moved to Mexico at the expense of a cartel and murdered 150 women. That one was investigated, but it was never proven. I find it creepy because it's still happening. Probably not the creepiest, but by far the weirdest one is that of Sneha Phillip. She lived in Manhattan and was last seen the day before 9/11. From what I remember, she lived pretty close to the World Trade Center with her husband. I just watched the Unsolved Mysteries episode about this. What sucks is the authorities ended up deeming her among the 9/11 missing, but considering she never came home the night of the 10th and never called her husband to tell him she was staying anywhere that night, makes me think the attacks had nothing to do with her disappearance. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that she didn't die from the attacks, but her family probably just wanted closure. I truly believe she died the same day she disappeared, but I also can't truly rule out she's alive and ran away, but that theory has loads of issues on how she would have done that without money and at least some personal belongings. Don't recall where this happened, but there's an audio recording of an elderly lady calling 911 because she saw a suspicious person outside her home. Everything on the call seems nice and quiet while the dispatcher tries to get information from the woman. Until a second later, the elderly woman starts screaming out of fear for her life mixed with crying, and the phone call ends. The dispatcher never got the address of where she was located, so they were never able to confirm what that whole call was about. The recording is used in training now as an example of why you always get the location of the caller first. Happened in 2019 in my town. A few days after Valentine's Day, a 19-year-old named Leah Croucher mysteriously disappeared on her way to work. On her way to work, there is a lake that she has to walk around. There was CCTV footage on 2 spots on the footpath around the lake. She is seen walking on the first camera, but there is a short space between the second camera, around 2 minutes, but she never appears on the second camera, meaning she went missing in that short space between the 2 cameras. She was a black belt in karate, and her dad is a karate instructor, meaning she probably could have fought off an attacker. A woman sees her just before she disappears, crying with her AirPods in. Divers search the lake multiple times, but find nobody. A few months later, a woman claims she saw a hoodie that matched the one Leah was wearing when she disappeared, hanging from a tree in the forest next to the lake, but is no longer there. The family revealed she was having a relationship with a man in his 30s whom they describe as ex. He was a married man, I think, who was having an affair with her. Her family tells her to end the relationship because he's married and the relationship will not go far. Just before Valentine's Day, Leah's dad drops her off at a Premier, a big hotel chain in England, where she was going to stay with her friends, where they were going to drink alcohol and do their nails and gossip and just be normal teenage girls. Friends say that they never did that. Later on, find out that Leah walked off to a not as good hotel and pays for a room which she is suspected to have stayed in with ex. No video footage proof, as it has been too long, and the hotel has deleted all footage from that time. Ex is interrogated and has an alibi for the time she disappeared and was deemed innocent. All Leah's bank accounts have remained untouched and her phone turned off. Just before Leah's 20th birthday, her brother commits suicide because he can't deal with not knowing what happened to her. Then COVID hit and everyone forgot about her. Nowadays, if you go through my town, you will see missing posters from 2 years ago, and a £5,000 reward for information billboard on the motorway or spray paint on a bus stop saying "Find Leah." The Zodiac killings. The two Mary Morris murders. They occurred near Houston, Texas, within days of each other. Police believe they are connected, but it is a big mystery as to who did it. It is still unsolved. This happened in the early 2000s. Central Florida. Gator hunters were constantly bringing in catches from the same area with human remains inside them. DNA matched over 15 people. Then suddenly they stopped bringing in gators who ate human remains. Still scares the shit out of me. Don't know if it's been mentioned yet, but those yogurt shop murders of 4 teenage girls in Austin, Texas back in 1991. Some boys were convicted of them, but the convictions were overturned. Also, I believe that some DNA found on one of the girls didn't match any of the guys who were charged. A very tragic and convoluted case. There's a great book about it called "Who Killed These Girls?" by Beverly Lowry. Lake Oconee murders are pretty creepy. An elderly couple lived in an upscale gated community with plenty of cameras in the area. Russell Dermond was found in his garage decapitated, and his wife was found floating in the lake. His head has never been found, nor do they have any suspects. The Watcher. 99% chance it was some real estate scam or something, but it's a really creepy story. My half-brother was kidnapped off his paper route, strangled, and hung from a door inside a laundromat 2 blocks from home. No fingerprints were left, and the killer was never found. For years afterward, somebody hung a noose from my dad's rearview mirror on the anniversary of the murder. Garrett Bardsley. I was friends with his older brother in high school when he went missing. There were search parties out constantly but never turned up anything. Garrett played baseball on my little brother's team, and that whole family is so nice it kills me that Garrett is still out there somewhere and that we'll probably never know what happened. For those who are unfamiliar with this case, Garrett and his dad were camping up in the Uintas here in Utah on a scouting trip. They walked to the lake to go fishing. Garrett got his pants, shoes, and socks wet and went to change at the campsite, which was only 100 to 200 feet away, and was never seen again. There were about 15 other scouts and about 5 other adults in the area with them too, if I remember correctly. It's crazy and terrifying and absolutely depressing. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. How a very large, top-of-the-line commercial plane operated by a major airline carrier can just disappear? In the 1940s, it was Christmas Eve and the Sauter family was getting ready for bed. The mother allowed the youngest children to stay up late as long as they were supervised by the eldest daughter. A while later, there was a phone call and the mother went to go answer, but when she picked up, it was just a woman's laughter. After answering, she went to go check on the kid, but none of them were down there except the eldest daughter that was fast asleep on the couch. The youngest children had gone to bed. So it appeared. The blinds were not shut and the door was not locked. These were regular things the kids had to do, and the mother assumed that they have just forgotten. She did the chores and then went to sleep. A bit later, she was awoken by what seemed to be a rubber ball bouncing on the roof. She ignored it and then went back to sleep. A bit later, she woke up again and there was a huge fire that had started and was beginning to engulf the house. The mother woke the father, who woke the children, and one of the children was in charge of waking up the kids sleeping in the attic. The entire first floor was engulfed and the boy went up and yelled for the kids sleeping in the attic to come down. He ran after yelling and got out of the house, but the kids never followed. After the entire house was engulfed, they began sobbing, realizing the kids were most likely dead. The court determined that the fire was caused by faulty electrical boxes, but the most chilling detail in the story is that no bones were found of the kids, and something that could be even worse is that in the bushes behind their house, they found a pineapple grenade. 2 cases. The Springfield 3. 3 women disappeared overnight without a trace. Recently, autistic 11-year-old kid in Omaha Ryan Larson went missing. He walked out of school 3 months ago and has been gone since. He did research on how to hide from the police. The boy in the box. He had been washed with his hair freshly cut before he was killed and put into a box. I hope they kept his DNA so we can check into who his parents were. The random feet are found in shoes on beaches along the Washington and Canadian coasts. That's it, just a foot in a shoe. They've found like 20 feet. Edit, I found out I was wrong. They have found pairs of feet before, just not always. Sorry for the wrong info. The Smolensk air disaster. A little background: following the Soviet occupation of Poland post-World War II, the Russians wanted to eliminate the Polish elite from society, mathematicians, doctors, and the like. It is estimated that they killed 22,000 Polish academics in the Russian forests near Smolensk. In recent history, the Russians have always denied this officially. Come to 2009, 2010, and finally, after years of pressure, Russia extends an invitation to the majority of the Polish government to join them in the same Russian forests where their ancestors were murdered, with a promise of an official apology, etc. So in 2010, 95 of Poland's top state officials board a flight, going to the ceremony in Russia, when it crashes, and all on board died. I'm from a town called Bardstown, Kentucky. There's a string of known unsolved murders that are pretty creepy there. The first starts with Kathy and Samantha Netherlands, who were tied up in front of each other in their home. Samantha, the daughter, was tortured and murdered in front of her mother while she was forced to watch, and then Kathy had her throat slit. There was no evidence, other than a blurry picture of a black car that doesn't show a person or plates. The second is the Jason Ellis murder. He was a police officer, known around town as the only good officer on the force, as the rest were incredibly corrupt. He was on his way home to Bloomfield when he got to an exit. There was a tree branch laid across the road. He got out to move it and was ambushed and murdered there on the exit. He was shot several times with a shotgun. After that was the disappearance of Crystal Rogers. Her car was found on the side of the highway with her phone, keys, etc. all still inside. To this day, her body has never been found. The main suspect is her boyfriend Brooks Haug and his police officer brother. They found her bodily fluid in the trunk of the patrol unit Brooks's brother owned. Yet there hasn't been enough evidence to arrest and convict them. The add to this story, her father and mother spent all of their time searching for her, countless hours searching woods, innumerable amounts of money hiring the best detectives and lawyers, etc. Crystal's father was out hunting one morning with Crystal's son. During this hunting trip, her father was killed by an unknown person, also using a shotgun. Many people think all of these are linked to our police force, as every victim has some sort of tie to them. And lastly, this murder isn't creepy, and it's even solved if you ask anyone who knows Gage, but it shows how corrupt the local police are there. In 2015, my best friend Gage Jolly went to a party with some friends. He was an 18-year-old kid. During that party, someone we were previously friends with but at this point was not cool with had a gun that he had stolen from another friend's mom. He was passing it around to everyone at the party, unloaded, and allowed them to pull the trigger and play with it. Later in the night, he goes into the bathroom, comes out and asks Gage to go outside with him. Gage was drunk but agreed. Once they got outside, it was Gage, Tyler, the guy with the gun, and a girl. Everyone at the party says the door wasn't closed more than 30 seconds before everyone heard the gun go off. The girl outside has told others that Tyler was responsible for the death, but refuses to tell the police. After the gun goes off, Tyler throws it behind a bush that's like 30 feet away, goes and gets his friends, and they walk over Gage's dead body, got into their car, and sped off the scene. The police eventually found them over 45 minutes away. Once police arrived on the scene, they called Gage's mother. One cop tells her, "Don't trust everyone. I believe this was suspicious circumstances," while other cops tell her that Gage simply shot himself and committed suicide. The guy, who was underage to be in possession of a handgun, let alone a stolen handgun, had run, hid the gun, etc. Went on to taunt me, his mother, our friends, etc. with Snapchat like, "Guess who got away with it?" No matter what we did, the cops would not take us seriously, and even went as far as telling his mom, "Oh well, he's clearly a junkie, so he would have died anyway." And that's the story of how Bardstown police are incredibly corrupt and are thought to be linked to several murders, and well as letting murders slide. The murder of Elizabeth Short, aka the Black Dahlia murder. The characters of this real-life story, not real names: Aditi Jack, Aditi's husband and writer in a newspaper; Jay, Aditi's brother; X, a politician who was just elected as the town mayor. I won't tell the name as I don't want to get killed in my sleep. X was just elected and Jack had an interview scheduled with him. He went to visit him and overheard the politician talking about how 3 billion rupees wasn't enough to allow illegal construction. Jack ran home and started telling his family, who contacted their close friends and relatives to tell about it. I am on that list of friends the next day. When I try to contact them, nobody answered. I keep trying and eventually call Jay after 11 days. Jay visits them and finds all 4 of them shot in the head and half burned. Jay contacts the police and they file a complaint. The next day, the officer tells Jay that the case is closed due to no facts being present. The bodies were burned as it is a Hindu tradition. Jay tries to contact the media and they show interest in the story and take his statement. After a day, the media group says no to publishing his story. After 4 to 5 days, Jay goes missing. After 15 days, he is found in a forest tied up to a tree with his hands and mouth tied and beaten up badly. I met Jay and he said there's no point fighting against a politician or else we'll be killed. I learned a lesson. Stay away from politicians. Chris Kramers and Lisanne Froon. 2 girls from the Netherlands went to Panama for a holiday and disappeared when they got lost together on a popular hiking trail. Their remains and backpacks were found, but no one knows how they died or what happened to them. Absolutely terrifying. The disappearance of Dennis Martin in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Noah Donahoe of 14 went out to meet with some friends and went missing, was then found a week later, dead in a storm drain. The Millbrook twins. They were twin girls that disappeared in my local area. The cops didn't even look for them and closed the case a couple of years after they disappeared. It was reopened, but so many years have passed. My favorite creepy mysteries. I love this stuff. That's why I have so many to list, and I've probably overlooked some. Disappearances of Asha Degree 2000, Beaumont Children, 1966, Sauter Children, 1945, Beverly Potts, 1951, Martin Family, 1958, Johnny Gosh, 1982, Fort Worth Trio, 1974, Springfield 3, 1992, Vandal Children, 1978, Jennifer Kessie, 2006, Amy Lynn Bradley, 1998, Brandon Swanson, 2008, MH370, 2014, Dennis Martin, 1969. Unsolved Murders, Walker Family, 1959, West Memphis Murders, 1993, Burger Chef, 1978, Yogurt Shop, 1991, Bowling Alley, 1990, Tylenol, 1982, Darden Family, 1987, Girl Scout Murders, 1977 Murders, 1981, Valerie Percy, 1966, Villisca Axe, 1912, Lizzie Borden, 1892, Jack the Ripper, 1888, Hinterkaifeck, 1922, Boy in the Box, 1957, Lindsay Buziak, 2008, Grimes Sisters, 1956, Delphi, 2017, The LaSalle Street Murders, 1971, and The Somerton Man, 1948, but hopefully we'll know the answer to that soon through DNA testing. And the mysterious death of Amarillo lawyer David Lewis in 1993 deserves a mention. Amy Bradley's disappearance. The fact that a woman claiming to be her showed up for years afterward asking for help is what really creeps me out. I don't like thinking about how many people are trapped in similar situations in the world right now. The Polaroid photo of a boy and a girl, bound, gagged, and looking straight into the camera, was found in a parking lot in Florida in 1989. Though there seems to be strong evidence linking the photo to a girl named Tara Calico, who went missing the year before in New Mexico, their identities are still, officially, not known. The photo itself feels both creepy and sad. The Springfield Three. 3 grown women just up and vanished. A mother, her daughter, and her daughter's friend. They've never been found. No one has any idea where they went. Presumed murdered, but we don't even really know that for sure. There was a serial killer who murdered over 30 people but was let out of prison after just 18 years for some godforsaken reason, even after promising he would kill again when he got out. No one really knows where he is or what he's up to nowadays, and there's a fine chance he's killed more people. Pedro Lopez actually was sentenced for killing 110 girls, but they claim to have raped and killed more than 300 girls across Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. The Yuba County Five. A group of 5 men, 4 with intellectual disabilities, went from Yuba City, CA to a basketball game in Chico, CA. They themselves were on a basketball team set to play the next day, all of them excited for it. Somehow, despite many maps and a pretty straight route, they went a route that took them towards the Plumas National Forest, onto a mountain, high enough to surpass the snow line. They were seen by a man who was stuck there and having a heart attack, who heard talking and weird whistling noises standing with a woman and a baby in the light from their headlights. When he called for help, they shut them off. The car would be found a few days after it initially went missing, a bit stuck in the snow but with no engine problems and plenty of gas. They were nowhere around and the snow had been bad enough that even the searchers had trouble. They would eventually be found 20 miles from their car. They weren't dressed for snow, so how they made it that far was shocking. One was found dead in a trailer that belonged to the park rangers, dead of exposure and starvation, despite the fact that the trailer had heat that only needed to be turned on and dozens of food cans that had been opened and emptied, and more food stored away. 2 of the others were found a few miles back, dead of hypothermia. Only the spine and skull of the 4th were found, also said to have died of hypothermia. The 5th was never found. There are theories, but no answers. The 4 found dead were missing from February 78 to June 78. With snow and cold weather, I'd like to know how at least 2 of them were only bones. Scavenging, to me, doesn't fully explain it. The disappearance of Asha Degree. She was only 9 years old. In 2000, at around 2 a.m., she packed her bag and left her home on her own. She was seen walking alongside a highway. It was cold and raining heavily outside. A driver pulled over to her, concerned about a girl so young being out on her own in such conditions. Asha got spooked and ran into the wooded area nearby. She has not been seen since. About a year after her disappearance, the bag that she was last seen with was discovered buried underneath the construction site, about 30 miles away from her home. No one knows why Asha left home that night. The most plausible theory is that she ran away and possibly was met with foul play in the process. Also, the disappearance of Lars Middenk. In 2014, he traveled to Bulgaria from Germany with some friends on a holiday. After getting into a fight over football in a pub, Lars ruptured his eardrum and as a result, was informed by a doctor that he was unable to fly home until it healed, at least a month. Lars' friends offered to stay with him for that duration, but Lars insisted that they go back home. They eventually went back to Germany without Lars, who checked in a down-market hotel in a not-so-well-off/dodgy area. A day after his friends left, Lars began to exhibit some odd behavior and called his mother, telling her that he believed that people were following him and wanted to kill him. He also told her to cancel his credit cards. On July 8, Lars went to the airport to fly back to Germany despite being told not to fly yet. He was consulting with the airport doctor when they were interrupted by a member of a construction crew. Lars, spooked out, rapidly left the doctor's office, leaving his wallet and passport behind. He fled the airport and was captured on CCTV climbing over a fence and running into a nearby forest. No one has seen him since. It is most likely that Lars had a mental illness that went undiagnosed and was unleashed by either his head injury or the medication he was prescribed by the Bulgarian doctor. Another more wacky theory is that he was telling the truth about him being followed and was made a drug mule who was eventually caught and killed. Still, nothing is concrete, so we can only guess. Other honorable mentions include the disappearances of Martin Allen, Amy Lynn Bradley, Charlene Downs, and Melanie Ethier, as well as the unsolved murder of 8-year-old Vishal Malhotra. I am a little late here, but I have 2 that stand out to me because of their proximity to my life. The first is the disappearance of Tricia Reitler. She was the niece of a close family friend of my mother's. She disappeared in 1993 near Indiana Wesleyan University in Marion, Indiana, when she ran to a local grocery store on a study break. Her blood-stained jeans, shirt, and shoes were discovered in a field nearby. Her family believes she is deceased. There have been a few different suspects in her case over the years, one confession that was later recanted. Her case is open and unsolved. It was one of those "this doesn't happen to people you know" moments. The second is the disappearance of Brandon Swanson from the Marshall, MN area in 2008. After a night out with friends, he crashed into a ditch and was confused about his location. He called his father for help, as his parents searched for him where he thought he was, but wasn't. He said, "Oh shit," and the call dropped. Repeated calls to his phone went unanswered. His car was found the next morning, but he was not. There is no sign or sighting of him to date. I worked with his sister when we were both fresh out of college. I still see his parents from time to time and can read the heartbreak on their faces. They are the kindest people. Yet another case of just slightly removed from something unthinkable. That odd cicada project. I heard a few people succeeded in finding what they were looking for, but nothing in return as to what it is they were looking for in the first place. The lost footage of a man slowly getting lost at the catacombs in France, or was it in Europe? Dunno, but the mystery is the person who was recording that runaway that left his camera was never found in the catacombs. Did he come back to the surface? Or did he perish? Can't say for sure. It was spooky news that spooked me to this day. The Lake Bodom murders in Finland. 3 or 4 kids go camping on Lake Bodom one night and all but one are found murdered the next day. They had all been in their tent and someone attacked them with a large rock from the outside, tearing through the tent and crushing their heads. The survivor had severe brain damage and hasn't been able to talk or answer questions to this day. A gas station worker nearby was questioned and committed suicide shortly after, but suicide is prevalent in Finland due to the long dark days in winter, so they know. No official suspect has ever been named. Israel Keys. Israel Keys is at the top of any list like this for me. They have no idea how many people he killed. He is dead now and will never have answers. He would travel all over the country and bury murder kits, then when he went back there he would use the kit to kidnap and torture someone random. He had no preference for gender, age, race, etc. It could be anyone. People have been working on his travel timeline for years in an attempt to match any missing persons to him, but for most, we'll never really know. What he did to Samantha Koenig and her loved ones will haunt me forever. I've read about a lot of serial killers, but to me, he's one of the worst. The several cases of young men in Wisconsin, often college towns, who disappeared after leaving bars or other events alone, their bodies typically turned up in local rivers. The original assumption, and still the leading police theory, is they simply fell into the rivers while drunk and drowned. However, many were last observed walking in the opposite direction of the rivers. Others were not as inebriated as the police indicated for the people who saw them last. This occurred between the 1990s to about 2015. There were odd similarities, such as a weird smiley face painted on the concrete near where some of the men were last seen. While serial killer theories abound, look up smiley face murders, the police have always maintained that they were individual accidents. Not sure about creepy, but Michael Donaghy disappearing in a playground. Even made it on Unsolved Mysteries. The Uncanny Valley. Why does it exist? From a purely evolutionary standpoint, we had to adapt most of our instinctual fears to survive. So what thing did humans have to fear that looked like a human, but slightly off? Before you say Neanderthals, recent studies have shown that Neanderthals went extinct because we bred them out of existence. Why would we bang something we were so terrified by? So anyways, doppelgangers exist and walk among us even today. John Benet Ramsey. I was obsessed in 5th grade with the case, but it didn't help with my anxiety. It terrified me. I just kept convincing myself that there wasn't much interesting to me and that I wasn't 6 years old, so it wouldn't happen to me. And here's today's winner. In 1983, I tossed a Rat cassette into my bedroom on the way to dinner. That tape was never seen or heard from again. I looked everywhere, even when we moved, but it had fallen in between.
Not leaving us so soon, are you?
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And feel free to leave a comment or email the Horror Girls with suggestions, your own scary experience, original fiction, disconcerting videos, or anything horror related that you would like to share. We'd also love to help promote indie or up-and-coming horror authors by posting a book review or your book trailer. Email us for more info.